Well, good day everyone. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about putting out hay and just give you a few tips that I've learned from others and some of the things that I've learned myself. And as you can see, this is Jig's Bermuda grass right here. We had a bit of a frost last night. It's been going dormant gradually over the last couple of weeks, and it doesn't have much green left. You probably won't pick up much on camera, but I wanted to show you how I put out hay. The rig I use, I'm using a tractor, and contrary to what, for instance, Greg Judy uses in Missouri, they have a lot of mud there, and I'd remind you that I'm on a sandy loam soil here, and I can get a huge amount of rain and I'm still going to be on dry ground. This sand just sucks the moisture out. Now if we have prolonged rains, there are periods that'll get a little bit boggy, but I can travel with the tractor over all my place and not leave ruts even after a rain. It's a good grass growing soil. The fertility is not very good. And so one of the things I do when I'm feeding cattle in the winter and putting out hay is I unroll that hay. And I know there's a lot of videos about unrolling hay, but I want to show you what happens here on my place and the rig I use. So I have a 72 horsepower Kubota, I think. I've got a spear on the front, and then I've got a bale unroller on the 3-point hitch on the back. And I want to show you what that looks like, how I hook up the bale, and how I get the hay unrolled. So stay tuned. One important point with regard to choice of equipment for your particular property is the amount of mud that you're going to have in your locale when it rains and things start to get mushy out on the pasture. On our soil, we can handle quite a bit of weight and we don't make ruts, and you definitely don't want to rut up your pastures because it just makes for a miserable experience downstream when you're just trying to travel across the landscape, etc. So in muddy situations, something akin to the Greg Judy bale unroller attached to an ATV so that you can move bales across the pasture and unroll them is an excellent choice. I choose to use a tractor, and only because I don't create ruts on my property because it's sandy loam soil, and so we can make that happen without creating more issues in the pasture. So when I'm traveling across the pasture, I'm going to have a bale on the front, assuming I'm feeding 2 bales at a time, which is my typical thing. And then I have this bale unroller on the 3-point. There's a variety of makes and manufacturers, and you can find them online. This one is made by Armstrong Ag, and it attaches to the 3-point. Pretty straightforward setup. It's run by hydraulics, so I can open and close the spears that are on either side from the tractor seat and spear the bale. I'll show you how to travel across the pasture with it so it doesn't drag, and then I'll show you how to unroll the bale. So stay tuned. I want to show you another piece of hay moving equipment that I used for years, particularly when I had the 7 lease places. And again, labor intensive, only in that you can only haul 1 bale at a time. But this hooks up to a pickup truck or a tractor or an ATV, and it has electric brakes on it. And you back up to the bale, set the electric brakes. Usually it's attached to the lights on your truck, so you pull on the parking brake or the parking lights and the brakes lock, and then once they lock you keep backing, and where this hinge is, that folds up and goes flush against the side of the bale, and then this arm falls over to the other side of the bale, captures the bale. You pull forward, and with the brake still locked, it flips the bale up on this little rack here. And that really works well. I've hauled lots of hay one at a time to different lease places to feed cattle. And again, that was at a period of my life when I was trying to do everything as cheaply and efficiently as I could afford, and that worked well for me. So this is called a tumblebug. A nice piece of equipment. It does not unroll the hay, it just transports the hay. And when I would use this, then I would just feed the hay in a hay ring, which I don't like for pasture improvement. The ability to unroll hay is paramount to pasture improvement and increasing soil fertility. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. After I drug that tumblebug around for multiple years to feed cattle, then I graduated to this hay van, and this particular hay van will haul 8 rolls of hay side by side. And the thing I liked about this hay van back then, because I had so many lease places, is that it's set up so that when you go to unload them, you turn the crank here and it will unload 1 roll at a time. So I could go to one lease place, maybe drop 2 rolls, maybe drop 1 roll, maybe drop 4 or 5 rolls, and then drive to the next lease place and drop some more. So it worked very well for me when I had several lease places. Now I use it to haul hay from a 15-acre hay patch that I have adjacent to the hospital, and I have a custom baler come out, cut the hay and bale it for me, and then we move the hay to the ranch via this hay van. So little steps as you improve your program, as you improve your cash flow, and as you're able to make adjustments to make things easier for you as you build your herd. So I'm going to try to talk loud over the engine noise, but what I do is come into the hay yard, and I've been feeding a little bit of hay out of this row here. I'm going to grab a bale with the front end spear, back out, and I'm going to drop this bale and catch it with the bale unroller, and then come back and get another roll with the front end loader. So I'll have 2 to go to the pasture with. Once you drop your bale outside the hay yard, then you got to figure out which way the bale was rolled so that you can figure out the correct way to unroll it. So if you hook on one side and it's the correct side, it'll roll in a continuous line of grass that's unrolling as you go forward with your bale unroller, whether that's a tractor or the Greg Judy bale unroller. If you hook it on the opposite side, it'll just come off in clumps, and you'll drive and drive and drive, and a clump here and a clump there. And I know Greg Judy prefers to do it that way on his pastures, and obviously that's zero problem with that. I prefer to do it in a long continuous strip. And again, just personal preference. So if you look at this bale, you can probably see on camera that this bale was rolled in this direction. So it was spinning in the round baler this direction, which just kept accumulating that hay. Sometimes it's not that obvious. Most of the time it's not that obvious. Typically it's cold, I'm in a hurry, I just need to figure it out, because you get it on backwards and it just aggravates you to death, particularly when it's late and you're tired. So the easy way to do that is to feel that bale with your hand. And if I put my hand on here and basically pet the bale, just like you'd pet a dog, I'm running my hand this way, everything's smooth under my hand. And when it's smooth, that's the direction you want to unroll this hay when you're trying to unroll it in a continuous line. If I run my hand the other way, it gets hung up and it hits these stems and it hurts. And so this is the opposite way, that direction. If you hook on from that direction and take off, it's not going to unroll the hay in a continuous line. It'll be a clump here, a clump there, and you just drive and drive and drive. And I prefer just to get it unrolled and done. So pet the bale, pretend it's a dog, that you're petting the hair with the grain. That's the side you want to hook to. If you want to unroll it in a continuous line, if you go against the grain, in other words, rubbing the dog's hair backwards from its tail end towards its head, you get caught up. And I know that that's not the way I want to unroll this roll. So that's just a quick and easy tip to figure that out on the fly. So I'm going to catch this bale with my bale unroller, and I got to come in square to the bale. For transport across the pasture, I want the spikes low. And the reason I say that, if I put them where I'm judging the center of the bale to be, and I capture that hay and then lift it up, you can see I don't have any clearance to get out across the pasture. I'm going to be dragging that bale the entire way. So what I've learned is to grab that hay low, and so I put the hydraulics on the 3-point a little bit low. I back into the bale, and then I'm going to close the spear and lift it up, and you can see how high I can get that bale off the ground. So I'm ready to go now. I'll go collect one more bale on the front end loader with the spear, and I'll go to the pasture where I'm going to feed the cattle. Our hay stored in 2 lots. One of them's actually in the wing of the corral, which is a little bit problematic, but we ran out of storage. I could have put it on the outside of this hay lot, outside this fence, and then electric fenced it off, and that would have been fine. But the guy that hauled it in thought it better in the corral, so when I got home, that's what I found. So we'll feed out of there first, and we'll be fine. One legitimate question would be, why would I spend $40,000 to buy a tractor to haul hay or put out hay? And the answer is multi-pronged. One is, I'm to that age where I wanted things to be a little bit easier for me. Number 2, I can afford it. And I worked hard to gradually get to that point in my life where I accumulated enough to be able to afford a nice tractor. I didn't overspend. I don't have a cab, you'll notice that. No air conditioning, etc. And I can do a lot of other things with this tractor. We have a grapple on the front that helps us move brush. We have a bucket, other attachments for the 3-point, and it's just a nice tool to complement the things we need done on the farm. So you don't have to have it. Again, I went years without a tractor and did things the hard way, but the way I could afford. And sometimes maybe you need to go a little above and beyond to be able to make your life a little bit easier, but obviously not always necessary, and there's other ways to do it. And so hopefully you can evaluate those circumstances for yourself. So these cows aren't too hungry. They've been eating some of this stockpiled forage for sure, and they're actually in darn good shape for the most part. So they're not just attacking it. We'll put a little bit out, let them clean that up for a few days, and as long as it's warm, I'm gonna let them keep eating this stockpiled grass. The protein content is probably quite a bit less than it is when it's growing good and lush, but I'm going to do some testing and test this grass to see where we are protein wise and compare it to when it was growing late summer, early fall this year. So I'll show you how to put this hay out. I'll tell you the cows aren't overly hungry, or they would be mobbing me right now. So they're leisurely strolling this way. This is the time of day when they're usually laying down chewing their cud. But they're just kind of bored, looking for something to do, so they're thinking, why not eat a little bit. Now, just in case anybody's wanting to know, this Brahma heifer and this half South Pole, half Longhorn cross heifer are owned by my neighbor, and so he has graciously allowed me to use his pasture, and so we electric fenced it over the summer and ran cows in there, and that was an awesome thing for me and him, really improving his pasture. But this Brahma heifer and the Longhorn cross, South Pole, and then 3 other animals are his, and so we're just going to run them as a mob, and I'm just taking them around with my cattle, and we're going to improve his pasture, improve my pasture, and let him grow his stock. So what I do is I drop the bale, and I'm going to pull forward, so I unhook the bale, pull forward slowly, because these cows in front, you'll run over something if you're not being slow, because they could care less what you're doing other than they want a mouthful of hay. And then I come back and I cut the netting off the bale. So I use a utility knife. I'll show you that here in a second. But use a utility knife, and the reason I like a utility knife over a pocket knife is those blades get dull. I swap out with another blade, and I got a brand new sharp instrument to cut this netting, and this netting, cutting the netting through the netting and into the hay, will dull it relatively quickly. So I pull this netting back over the top. I don't have it out from underneath the bale yet, and then I'm going to get on the tractor and I'm going to grab that bale in the center and unroll it, and then I'll come back and pick up this netting. And I don't have to do that with the front roll, because I'll cut the netting off of it while it's lifted up off the ground. So it's a little cumbersome at the back on the roll on the back, but it's not bad. So I'm going to position my, again, I got to go slow because I don't want to injure a cow. I'm going to position my bale unroller where I judge via my vantage point on the seat where the center of that roll is. Sometimes I guess right, sometimes I guess wrong. Then I'm going to put the 3-point all the way down, and we're going to start going forward, and we're going to see how we do. So I got to go slow until these cows get out of the way, and then once they figure out I'm coming through, then I can go ahead and speed up. So I just keep driving till that roll does its thing, and I don't have it hooked right in the center. I'm going to go till I have to re-hook. It's still unrolling good, and you can see these cows, they want to get right in the middle of it, but that's okay. We just unroll that bale just like it was rolled up, and when we get down to the core, if it stops unrolling, I'll just drop that where it is. Now a lot of times I'll just I'll re-hook, lift it up a little bit. I'm going to go back just a smidge, and we're going to see what I can get done here. So it's a process, and you learn your equipment, you learn what you like to do. Is one better than another? It just depends on your circumstances and how you want to roll or unroll, pun intended. So here's my utility knife. I picked this up at the Kubota store only because it was handy and I was there. But just a regular utility knife, swap out the blades, and you can keep on cutting. So now I'm going to put out the front roll, and so again, these knives, a pocket knife gets really dull really quick, and so you're cutting through hay and whatnot. So I like a utility knife. It's quick, pretty easy. Swap out blades. This blade's getting dull, but it's not bad. We'll take off this netting. Got to make sure you get it all cut. Now when it gets icy, this can be tough to get off. I mean tough. And when we had Snowmageddon this year, February, I couldn't get the netting off some rolls. I just cut it and started driving, and finally came off. So this is Johnson grass hay. Get all the netting out, and then I'm ready to unroll it. But it's Johnson grass hay, grows on the hay field I have next to the clinic. And so on that hay field, I'll get a cutting of ryegrass in the late spring, and then I get 2 to 3 cuttings of Johnson grass. And then I have some outside hay brought in that's coastal Bermuda grass from a hay field that a client has. So I try to stockpile enough hay so I can get through the winter. It was a little tight last year, and so I probably overdid it this year. I think I've got about 250 rolls. I typically figure 3 rolls per cow for a winter. And so you do the math from there, depends on how many you got and certainly your location. And that's quite a bit of hay. Usually I can get by with 1.5 to 2, but I try to have some insurance there in case we get in a jam. So here's the hay unrolled. You can see the cattle are getting after it. They really enjoy this Johnson grass. Now I know some of you are going to say, what about all that forage that they're standing on that's tall? And we're going to talk about that in another video. This is Tifton 85. There's a little green left, but this stuff gets really stemmy once it gets a frost on it, and they just don't prefer it. I could make them clean it up, and maybe I should, but I want to keep them in good shape. A cow that's in good shape is going to cycle back. She's going to get pregnant. She's going to have a calf. She's going to be able to produce milk for that calf. And so I've learned over the years, don't skimp on feeding your cattle. And so I'm putting out hay sparingly, meaning I'm going every 3 or 4 days, putting out a couple rolls. In the meantime, once they clean this up, they will eat on this stockpiled forage as well. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of a dance. And again, I don't know that I have all the answers. I'm trying to figure those out as I go, and been doing this quite a few years, and I know I've had some really poor cattle because I was trying to skimp on groceries that wouldn't cycle back and then wouldn't have a calf, and defeats the purpose of having them for sure. So we're going to unroll this last roll and go to the house. This unrolls quite nicely. Cattle will poop and urinate and fertilize around this hay. I don't ever unroll the hay on the same spot twice. I look for a different area each time, and year to year I try to remember where I put it out last so that I can make sure I don't concentrate it in one spot. I want to show you where I've fed some hay, and it has been unrolled right here. You can see scattered manure fertilizing the ground. This leftover hay, which really isn't much, surprisingly, they cleaned it up pretty darn good. This leftover hay will decompose and put nitrogen back into the ground. And if I can, over the years, spread my hay unrolling out and put it in a different place each time, I'm gonna, in conjunction with the manure and the urine and all the fertility that provides, I'm going to increase the fertility of my soil. So unrolling hay, I think, is probably the best thing that I've found to improve soil fertility. Hopefully I'm going to get away from any external inputs with regard to fertilizer. I don't have a problem using it to try to jumpstart a place. If you don't have grass and you can't grow grass, you're going to need some help. Obviously moisture helps, grass seed helps, sprigged grasses help. All those inputs cost money, but I found when I cleared some of this land that if I just let it be and run cattle on it, that they will, the grass will start to grow, whatever's in that particular area. So this is all hay that's been eaten, Johnson grass hay. All this will be totally gone and decomposed, and you won't even be able to see these areas in probably by June of next year. It'll be totally decomposed, and this grass in these areas will be growing like you can't believe. So I really am partial to unrolling hay. No question, it's good for the cattle to keep their nutrition requirements up when it's cold and the grass is not growing. I will let them eat, or try to make them eat some of this dormant grass that's been stockpiled by not feeding too much hay. So it's a delicate balance, but I want to keep their nutritional needs satisfied and nurture that. And then I want to feed the soil microbiome. And so when you see this hay as it decomposes, it's amazing what that does in conjunction with the manure and the urine from the cattle eating the hay. So with that, I'll wrap it up. I very much appreciate you watching. Please subscribe and like if you will. And I hope this helps you in your operation. Have a great day.